everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Social Wave Project podcast. My name is Sarah Francis, but everyone calls me Sez. And after a month of the Titanic month for the last few weeks, we've decided to go back to the schedule as normal because I am joined by a member of the National Autistic Society, which is a local charity in the UK. And the person who's joining us is Tom. Tom, hello.
Hi, Sez. Hi, how you doing?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Really good. Really good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's such a really big celebration, and it's a good part to be on as well because, for those who don't know, the National Autistic Society this year is celebrating its 60th birthday, which is a massive big deal. And I really cannot believe it's been 60 years since they were running. I thought it was less than that.
Yeah, for a lot of people, they might not realise really that the National Autistic Society has been going for 60 years. And really, if you think about some of the early, the first people to be kind of formally diagnosed as autistic was only in the 1950s. So really, we were there quite close to not the start of autism, because of course there's always been autistic people, but for as long as if you like, the medical sector have been talking about autism as being a recognisable, diagnosable condition, we've kind of been around trying to do our things. So yeah, but 60 years is a long time.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a really long time as well. And I know that I was looking through the history of it about months ago, and it was trying to process everything in really because there was so much events that were happening, which I was really quite surprised about. But I know we're going to probably jump on into them during the interview. But yeah, so prepare for a lot of facts and figures really. If you haven't known that already, history that you really didn't know about, it's going to be there. But then before we start, Tom, can you tell us what role you have in the National Autistic Society?
I've been at the charity for 11 years, and I've been lucky enough to do quite a few things during my time. So I joined back in 2010. I used to be a civil servant. I've got an autistic son as well. So what I used to do was work with local authorities, councils, and help them develop housing strategies. And then when I just joined the charity, it was a great opportunity, personal connection. I came along to help local authorities to write and develop their autism strategies, because in England we've just had the Autism Act and the National Autism Strategy, and local authorities are all developing their own autism strategies about how they were going to make things better and develop services for autistic adults. So I came in to do that. I was only supposed to be here for 2 years to do that in the first place, but I've been lucky enough that every time something's come to an end, something else has come along, another opportunity. And that's led to me last year becoming our head of guidance, volunteering and campaigns, which covers loads of different stuff. You've got some fantastic people who work as part of my team doing incredible things through our branches, supporting people right across the UK in their communities, to our specialist casework teams that provide really specialist advice and guidance and support across education rights and for people who are at risk of going into inpatient mental health hospitals. We've got our employment team, all of our national campaigning work, campaigning for change, lots more besides. I'm sure there's bits I'm not mentioning there, but it's a really, really exciting and fantastic role and a real privilege to have it and do it.
Oh, that's really good though, because I know, Tom, you've been doing like loads of work for the National Autistic Society. Well, in fact, many members of the team of the National Autistic Society have been doing such a marvellous job. I know that the biggest one that I remember the most is the Autism Act. And I still cannot believe how strong it's going after 10 years, really. And I know that act for me is like the holy Bible for autism, because I have been using it quite a lot in my spare time, really, when every case comes up, like discrimination and some things that I really want to talk about, really, when it comes to inequality. And yeah, I mean, it's so brilliant to do what the charity does. And also, I follow the Instagram page as well, where they do such amazing like campaigns, really. And I've seen pictures of a group of of people, mainly teens actually, but I really cannot remember because it's about weeks ago. But there's been a group that stood outside the Houses of Parliament. Oh, I mean that's just amazing, really, to see how much work the National Autistic Society has done, and it feels like a huge honour to be part of that.
Yeah, and that the campaign you referred to is only our most recent bit of work that was specifically around education, because the government, this is in England specifically, but the government is reviewing SEN, special educational needs provision. So we've had lots of work going on behind the scenes, but then we always have the public part of it, so people can show their support and get involved. So we had a big petition, 45,000 people signed our petition. And then we handed that in to the government, which is the pictures people will have seen of some people standing outside in NAS t-shirts. We had a nice little photo shoot on Parliament Square. But it's all about making sure that we're banging away and keep sending the message that more needs to be done. Not enough is being done for autistic people. And of course, in this case, it was autistic children, young people, but a lot of the time it's adults as well. We're here and campaign for all autistic people and their families.
Oh, exactly. I mean, there are so many things that I went through for myself, or there was cases where friends I used to know or know have been in similar situations like that as well. So it is really important just to keep the fight going on, and then just to raise more awareness about it. And the more awareness, the better. And speaking of that, because we were actually going to jump into the history, and I was wondering, Tom, can you tell us about the history of the charity and explain why it started?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I say, it came about because autism, if you like, became a thing with a name. At that point, children were being diagnosed as autistic, and the the families, the parents of those quite early to be diagnosed children in the UK, kind of found each other in London, and they got together and they were looking around, looking at their futures and their children's futures, and wondering what was going to happen, because they were being told that their children were ineducable, they couldn't be educated, that they were best off just putting them in a institution and kind of forgetting about them and move on. So really, they were being told that there was nothing that could be done. There was no support or help, and that they should just not worry about it, really. And this group of parents in 1962 sort of said, no, we're not going to accept that. And so basically started the charity to start creating that support and those services, initially for themselves and for others that they attracted. But that led to the first school specifically for autistic children in 1965. And then a few years later, the first residential home for specifically for autistic adults, and that was in 1974. So you can see that quite quickly it went from, no, this isn't good enough, we're not going to take it, to actually creating the support and solutions for themselves. And really, that's the same spirit that still exists today. We know that things aren't good enough, and alongside campaigning for change, we're there to actually provide that help for people, and to help people help themselves as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there are so many cases that I know that are still going around, really, because I always think to myself, even though we are living in the 21st century, many autistic individuals and families who have autistic children or adults, they're still living in the dark ages. I always tend to find.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, still much more to be done.
But the more the better, really. And I know that with many campaigns and all of that as well, it's just amazing how people have come so far to do something like this, and content creators as well. Because last year and in 2020 as well, during the pandemic, there have been so much what was the word I'm looking for? So much debate about doing some scientific research for autistic people and individuals, and that really was the big main theme, really, for the last 2 years. But we also, what is the charity's purpose in terms of supporting individuals and families?
Well, we like to talk about the charity as being here to create a society that works for autistic people. So that's about all of society, really. Our focus isn't just on employment or on schools. We look at the whole big picture, and really we look at that in two ways. We're here to transform lives, which we do by we have schools, we have adult services which support a small number of people who have usually quite high support needs, that we actually provide that direct support to. But then we also provide through our branch network, through our the casework services I mentioned, through our website that gets about 4.5 million visitors a year, through lots of other bits of support, that kind of support to the rest of the 700,000 autistic people and then their families that are in the UK. So that's the transforming lives part of it through our help and support. But there's also a changing attitudes part of it as well. And that's not just about awareness of autism, that's about training professionals, it's about our successful conferences, it's about changing the attitudes of governments towards autistic people and the help and support they need, willingness and ability to employ autistic people. So that's the changing attitudes side. And really what that all hopefully adds up to is bits of action and support that is slowly changing society. Change doesn't happen overnight, but is helping to create that society that will work for autistic people. But that's a long-term thing. We're going for 60 years. We know it might take another 60 years still before we truly get to that society that works for autistic people.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then we're going to actually jump into the next question, because I know you've got something to add to it, Tom. But well, I think we've covered it most, really, for the next question. What has been the main achievement or achievements that the charity has made with it in the last 60 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think in some ways the fact that the charity came together and even existed, as I say, opening the first school, opening the first residential home, that seems incredible. There was an amazing moment right at the end of the 1970s where one of our founder members, the psychiatrist Dr. Lorna Wing, who you might have heard from, so she was one of our founding parents. She absolutely revolutionised how the world saw autism by coming up with the concept of the autism spectrum, that autism had these degrees of difference and impact for different individuals, meaning that there were far more autistic people in the world than had previously been understood or considered. So I think that revolution in how autism was thought of and understood was massive, and really we still feel the effects and impact of that revolutionary thinking today. So that was massive. But I think for me, you mentioned the Autism Act and how important it is, and I think sometimes people don't always realise, but for me the Autism Act and the Autism Strategy, one of the biggest things it led to was, if you go back 10, 15 years, if you were an adult who thought you might be autistic, getting a diagnosis was more or less impossible. It was extremely difficult. And I think what we've seen since the Autism Act and the Autism Strategy is almost every part of the country now, there is a route whereby adults can get an autism diagnosis, can be assessed, and if they are autistic, get that diagnosis. And I think that's life-changing for so many people, and that wouldn't have happened without us campaigning with autistic people and families for the Autism Act and the Autism Strategy. So I think all of those people that had their diagnosis in the last 10 or since 2010 really, as adults, so much of it comes back to the Autism Act and the strategy, and I think that's an amazing achievement. I think for everyone that's involved in it. Lots of people that are involved in that aren't at the charity anymore, but I think it's incredible to think of that, again, that impact that it's had on so many people's lives. So and just how much achieving a change goes on to change the world, in bigger ways, because of course there are more autistic adults in the world, not more autistic adults, but there's more adults walking around knowing that they are autistic. And I think because of that raises the profile of autism further. It puts it out there, it mainstreams it in society, and so it has these sort of ripple effects that perhaps are hard to tie back to the thing that caused them, but you know that they're there, and I think it's incredible.
I know in two cases really. I know that Connor, who I interviewed in the first series, he was talking about that because he got a diagnosis not long after he was about 17 or 18, and that's how he came through the National Autistic Society. And then there's another friend who I know. She hasn't really got a diagnosis yet, but she questioned whether she was autistic or not because she thought, I think I might get a diagnosis, but I'm not too sure. So I referred her to the National Autistic Society website, and I said to her, they've got really good information there to get support, so it's definitely the best place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And not everyone will necessarily feel they need a diagnosis. Some people might get a bit of information, think, well, that's probably me, and that's absolutely fine. But in our experience, we sort of find that a formal diagnosis, if you're looking for support or adaptations at work or school or college, can be really important in unlocking that support. But of course, it's an individual's choice. And what we also know is that there's still far too many people waiting too long to access diagnosis. So it's by no means a solved issue.
But then hopefully, if more support and more awareness is needed, really, so then hopefully, fingers crossed, things would change. And then speaking of change, what have you found was the most challenging part of the charity?
It's a really good question, and I think it's, in a way, I can't really speak for all the people who've been through the charity since 1962, because I'm sure those parents that first sat around the kitchen table wondering what they were going to do felt that they had the biggest challenge in just getting any education or support for their children. But for me, I think the biggest challenge, even though we've come so far, is still right now, because we know that so many autistic people still face discrimination at school, in the workplace, across society. That, as I say, so many are still waiting months or even years for a diagnosis. 42% of autistic people report not feeling understood by medical practitioners. Only 29% of autistic people are in any form of employment. Autistic people are 3 times more likely to be excluded from mainstream school than non-autistic children. So in some ways, the biggest challenge is right now to fix those things, to not look at how far we've come and think, oh, that'll do, that's good enough, but to keep pushing so that none of none of that discrimination exists. So for me, now is the big challenge, and that's why it's so great to be here and be a part of it.
It sounds like many people in the charity are very enthusiastic just to help individuals and families. And with the figures you mentioned, Tom, people may think they don't sound high, but in fact, they are high in terms of how much a lack of support each person is getting every single year.
Yeah, definitely. And there's certainly lots more stats and figures that we could point to, which sort of point to the worse experiences that autistic people have than non-autistic people, whether that's work, school, society, medical services, etc.
I know that within the last few years, really, about let's say with the last 10 years, that everything has really changed, and loads of families and individuals had a massive big effect during the coronavirus pandemic. And I know that I've been following all the events and the rules and regulations, and of course, I was part of like the advice team on the National Autistic Society website to talk about what to do if you are unsure or concerned about the new rules and changes in the law. And everything from what I felt, in my own opinion, was little bit higgledy-piggledy, because when you listen to things like, say, from councils or the government, it got all confusing. And I know that I wasn't alone, really, because so many people have said to me, okay, I feel worried or confused and I have no clue what I'm doing at all. So it was a massive honour to be part of helping everyone have advice and all of that. And I could give advice all day if I could, really, but it's definitely one of the many great things that are part of it. So, in terms of that, with the recent campaigns like the Autism Act, and how much support was there during the coronavirus pandemic, what role has the National Autistic Society played during the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, just on coronavirus, you're absolutely right. Lots of people found the rules confusing or sometimes contradictory. So we kind of did three things around coronavirus, and this is for, again, the kind of the 700,000 autistic people, if you like. We had autistic people in our schools and services still, and loads of our staff were going absolutely above and beyond to make sure that their support could carry on as much as possible, during lockdowns and things like that, because lots of that was crucial support for individuals, people that need daily support and live their lives. So that was a massive part of it. But really, that for the 700,000, there were sort of three things. And the first thing was the stuff that you've talked about, the giving advice to people, talking to autistic people, finding out what was working for them, dealing with anxiety, with changes, and what was going on in the world, with the issues and difficulties around getting food in supermarkets, with how things had impacted employment, children at school. So really trying to use our voice and our platform to amplify the advice that autistic people could give to each other, really, about what was working for them. So that was number one. Number two was about the rules and all the information, and trying to cut through it all and take all of the stuff the government was putting out and make it as clear as possible for autistic people and families. What were the rules? What did it all mean? And I was amazed, actually. It's something that me and my team worked on, just how many people we had coming to our website for that information. You'd think they'd be going direct to the government, but actually we were having thousands of people, sometimes thousands of people a day, visiting our website to get a better understanding of the rules, which was amazing, because it felt like we were really playing a part in helping people understand those. And then the third bit was about, obviously the government was coming up with rules and guidelines all the time, but we felt our role, and this was largely sort of behind the scenes, was trying to make sure the government considered and took into account the needs of autistic people when coming up with different rules and the different guidelines. So we were able to secure, in those early days where people could only go out and exercise, I think it was only once a day, right at the start, back in sort of March, April 2020. But we got that exemption for autistic people. Autistic people needed to go out more often, if their routine was that they do that, if it was part of a support package, or how they were supported, whether in their own homes or in residential care, then they could do that. There was exemptions around mask wearing, for example. All of that was explicitly recognised, that some autistic people might not be able to wear masks. Around priority for vaccines for particular groups, and loads of other things. And all of that really was happening behind the scenes, trying to make sure that those rules worked for autistic people and their families as much as possible, whilst still balancing the need to keep people safe and to try and stop the spread of coronavirus at the same time. So, and then all of that kind of came together in that we had our coronavirus hub, and we were putting all of our information out, and had some really good resources for people about asking for reasonable adjustment at work, and downloadable resources they could use to explain the mask exemptions and things like that. So all of it was really popular, and it was a really good thing to be able to do. That was coronavirus. Did you want to talk about the Autism Act as well?
Yeah, if you want to, as like an example, or if it's a recent one, or if you want to talk about a recent one, then I don't mind, really.
Yeah, well, because the Autism Act, I could probably talk about it all day, really. I'll try not to. But it does all go back to even before 2009. We had a big campaign called "I Exist," which was about autistic adults. So that was about saying, autistic adults saying, "I exist." I want people to understand that I, as an autistic adult, exist and need support. So that campaign happened first. That was before my time at the National Autistic Society, and then that led to the the Autism Act, which produced an autism strategy, which was about how services needed to change and be improved to better support autistic adults. But of course, it's not the case that you see the government released a document in 2010 and that just means that, hey, it all happens and there it is the next day, the world's fixed. So really since then we've had 10 years of trying to make all of those promises that were in that real for people, to see services actually change, to make sure there's better support. And we know we're not there with it, but well, along the way we had a campaign called Push for Action in 2015. That was sort of 5 years of the Autism Act, and then we had 10 years of the Autism Act in 2020, where we were doing we had a big parliamentary inquiry around it. And what that led to is last year the government, and this is England specifically, put out their refresh of the strategy, and they committed £75 million to the first year of that strategy, which is not enough. Absolutely, we need much more. But it feels again like it's part of that ongoing battle and campaign to make change happen, and which we'll be carrying on. But really, that's where we are on the Autism Act and the autism strategy.
Yeah, because I know that I remember the I Exist campaign because this was like old Asian days for me because I was in secondary school at the time, and this is going to sound silly, but I was never interested in autism for a while. But I Exist was one of the first things I ever came across with my family, and then with the Autism Act, that actually gave me like, okay, now that's really interesting. So that was a little bit of a pinpoint start. And then with the other campaigns as well, which became over time, that actually got me thinking about talking about autism a bit more. And I think when it comes to campaigns like this, and when it comes to people who want to talk about autism, it just makes autism wants to be discussed a bit more in terms of it being a topic, or just having like a oh, what's the words I can put it? Just having a discussion with it, just something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think all of our campaigns, whether they are policy campaigns like the Autism Act, or whether they're about public understanding, all of them are there to make sure autism is better understood, autistic people feel accepted, that change is happening in the world, really. And it all has that knock-on effect of getting people talking about it and thinking about it, and being, understanding that there are autistic people in the world and that they might need something different to what non-autistic people need.
Speaking of like the campaigns, because we're going to jump onto the most fun part of the question, I think. Well, not the fun part of the question, the fun part of the interview, because this is the thing that I always like to talk about, really, in general, and it's the fundraiser events. And I always tend to think, really, if you ever want to do an event to raise money for a charity, if anyone hasn't done it, I highly recommend you do, because it makes a difference to many charities, especially with the National Autistic Society. And I know through them that I did the 5K walk on the Spectrum Night Walk, and then also I did the Abseil 1 year back in 2017, I think. Yeah, just for that 1 year. And then, of course, I'm going to be doing it again this month in memory of Indie Andy, as you know. And it just seems like it's fun to give something back in return, especially if a charity means a lot to you. And of course, there are so many people who actually work for a charity. The charity means something a lot to them, really. And I know with you, Tom, have you ever participated in a fundraiser event? And what fundraiser event did the National Autistic Society have made or participated in? And did you participate in any event yourself? And I know it's a little bit wordy, but hopefully I made sense of that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I've done a few fundraisers over the years. I must confess, I haven't done one for a few years. But I know, but it is with it being our 60th year, we've got lots going on. We've got and with World Autism Acceptance Week, there's lots happening. So I have got something planned. I'm not going to say yet because I haven't quite finalised the details of it, but I'm hoping it's going to be a bit of a challenge for me. It's something I've come up with myself to fit with the 60th theme. and something that hopefully I'll be able to raise a bit of money for. But yeah, I mean, we are a charity, and I think sometimes people think charities just get money from the government to keep going, and sadly that's not the case. We do have to raise and sort of fight for every pound that funds all of our services and our help and support. And it's incredible that there are people out there who see what they do and want to fundraise and support us. I'm always amazed and love looking through Twitter or whatever it might be to see everything that people are doing for us. Whether that's doing a little run to raise £100, we're doing something incredible for thousands, or those the kind of companies that work with us to bring in sort of tens of thousands, and all of it is important. All it keeps us going, so we're really grateful to anyone that does, and for anyone that wants to fundraise. There's loads of things as part of the 60th they can do. We've got something really exciting coming up where we're looking to raise 600k in 60 days. See the 60 theme here. And lots of ways that people can get involved with that. And then the things like you mentioned, says the Abseils, the sort of challenge events, they happen throughout the year. So whether it's biking or walking or lots of things like that, there's loads of options on our website. But what we've really liked to do in the last few years is try and make accessible fundraising opportunities for people. So the virtual runs and virtual walks, things like that, things that people can do in their own time and do at their own pace, because we know particularly something like a marathon might not always be the most autism friendly of events. It could be busy and noisy and crowded and overwhelming. So we want people to feel like they can fundraise in their own way at their own pace. And but yeah, as I say, we're just incredibly grateful to everyone and anyone who does fundraise and help keep us going.
And I know that there are so many bits that you can do as well. And this is going to be such a funny little mini story, because when I decided to do like the 5K last year, of course I didn't really do it in the end really, but I was about to do like a second year running, but of course I couldn't really, just because of the pandemic, and it was a big worry as well. But my friend once said to me, rather than doing the 5K, how about going for the 15K? And I was like, no way. I'm not fit enough to do that.
Everyone's own challenge is what makes fundraising exciting. You define your own challenge and your own opportunity, and I think that's what's great about it. And any support, as I say, is amazing.
And everyone just can go to as far as they can go, really. And it's just having about a great time, really. Even if you want to do like a short walk or a long walk or an abseil, or even in a future event like swimming or biking, that's still something. And then also we're going to jump into the one final question, really, because we have to talk about the future of the charity, especially in the case after World Autism Acceptance Week. And you have to keep us updated, Tom, like how everyone's getting on, really. And I'm sure the National Autistic Society will have like updates on the website and social media and all of that as well. But with that case, really, in coming up to in World Autism Acceptance Week now, what is the team hoping to achieve within the next few months or the next few years?
So we're always looking to the future and looking at what needs to be done next. I think particularly after COVID, we know it had a big impact on autistic people specifically. Lots of autistic people have felt the impacts more so than non-autistic people of all the sort of disruption, changes to support, education being disrupted, lots of those sorts of things. So we're going to be having a big continued focus on mental health and making sure we can provide support to people who are looking for it, and that's from like I say, our branches in people's communities, trying to support them and expand what they do to help as many people as possible. Our specialist casework services, as much information and advice and guidance on our website as possible, and then other small things like online community, which sometimes doesn't get as much press as the rest of them, but it's a really important place for autistic people to meet and connect and meet like-minded people and be supported by peers. So that's really important. But I know it doesn't always sound very exciting when charities talking about a new strategy, but I talked about what we know it might take another 60 years for a society that works for autistic people to really be created. And what we're doing at the moment is looking at, well, what does that mean? What does a world that truly works for autistic people look like? And looking at what we need to do, not just in the next few years, but over the next few decades to help achieve that. Because ultimately, we want a world where the National Autistic Society doesn't have to exist, where actually autistic people can be supported, understood, accepted, appreciated. They're not experiencing lower employment rates, that they're not being excluded from school at higher rates than other people, that they're not struggling to be understood by medical professionals. All of those things, we want them just to happen, and to happen without us needing to be here making it happen. So that's really the exciting thing for this year, and beyond that, let's see what comes out of that and where we're going to be going with it. So I'm really looking forward to doing that bit of work, and we're going to be talking to anyone who wants to be part of that about what they want to see from the charity, for us doing to help people now, in the next few years, and over the next few decades. So look out for that.
Oh, definitely. And I'm really interested to know as well, like, in something in the back of my mind, not just for the 60 years, but if in our lifetime, if we reach up to the 100th anniversary of the National Autistic Society, who knows what could have happened really within like each time really. And if it achieves something massive, it will be a massive celebration to not just for the charity, but to everyone in the United Kingdom as well, I personally think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we're actually going to leave it there because I think we know we talked about so much. But Tom, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. So thank you so much. It was absolutely brilliant. And if you would like to know more about the National Autistic Society, I will leave a link in the description box on my YouTube channel and on Spotify as well. And if you want to have a look at any of their pages on how to get support during the diagnosis or the campaigns or anything that me and Tom had discussed, it's all there really. And it's wonderful to have such an amazing opportunity to talk about it. And although I haven't got a cup, and I wish I had a cup of like champagne and all of that, but if I did, I would like, here's in the next 60 years. Yeah, so anyway, we'll definitely leave it there, and yeah, and join us next month for another and I know that I've got like special things that have come up as well. But if you have a celebrating Autism Acceptance Week this year, I hope you really enjoy it. And until then, I will catch you very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.